What's up, y'all? A little faith, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Fagnostic Podcast. I am your host, Matt Hayes, and if I'm still recording episodes, it means that I am still looking for answers. And today I am lucky enough to have arguably one of the most relevant and well-known voices in the entire Jewish faith. Rabbi Denise L. Eger served as the first openly gay or lesbian person as past president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. She's the founding rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami in West Hollywood, California. She was also the first woman ever elected as president of the Southern California Board of Rabbis, which includes Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and Orthodox rabbis. Rabbi Eger is the editor of the groundbreaking book Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells, a celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual, and is also the co-editor of Gender and Religious Leadership, Women Rabbis, Pastors, and Ministers. More information on these 2 books can be found online. Eger was named as one of the 50 most influential Jews by Forward and one of the 50 most influential women rabbis. I told y'all she was the real deal. Huffington Post named her as the #1 LGBT clergy person in America. Most recently recognized and awarded for her activism by the City of Los Angeles, the HRC, the City of West Hollywood, the California State Senate, and State Assembly. Rabbi Eger coaches nonprofit executives and clergy through her company Resilient Strategies. Raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Rabbi Eger graduated with honors from the University of Southern California with a bachelor's degree in religion in 1982. She received her master's and doctorate of divinity from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. And, as if she doesn't have enough credentials, Rabbi Eger is also a senior rabbinic fellow of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. I am so excited for you to hear this conversation on queer faith with Rabbi Eger. Rabbi Denise Eger, I am so thrilled to have you on this show, episode 3 of the Fagnostic Podcast. We met a little over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, actually now. It was at the top of the pandemic that we did the radio show here in LA. And I was introduced to you by another friend of mine at the Methodist Church. And I was so glad that she brought your name to my life because I have been so impacted by your message and your influence as it relates to not just your faith, but your interfaith efforts as well. And we're going to talk about all those things today. So thank you for being here. I started the episode off with a question. Are you a believer?
Well, first, thanks, Matt, for having me back. I'm excited to talk with you and visit with you today. I am a believer in the transformative power of love and kindness in the world. And that, to me, is part of what I call God.
That is my kind of God. Yes. And then what are your pronouns, just so that we don't assume anything?
My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a proud lesbian.
And just for my listeners, in case they don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Rabbi Denise Eger. I'm the founding rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami, which is West Hollywood's Reformed synagogue. We were founded in 1993 by a group of 35 queer people and have grown and thrived. We're over 300 households. And I have been the rabbi we're entering our 29th year, getting ready for our 30th celebration soon. I have served I'm a past president and the first openly gay or lesbian person to have served as the head rabbi of all the Reform rabbis in the world, the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And I did that from 2015 to 2017. And I'm a longtime queer activist, a longtime women's activist for women's issues and for human rights.
Yes, you are. And you've done a lot for the HIV and AIDS community as well, right?
I have. I still run a support group monthly for those with HIV who are HIV positive. I've done it for all these 30 years. I became a rabbi my career, I guess, if you will, has been marked by 2 pandemics. I became a rabbi in the late 80s during the height of the AIDS crisis, before there were drugs and treatments, in Los Angeles in 1988. This part, I'm almost more than 33 years later, we're still in the midst of another pandemic. But I've continued to serve people with HIV and AIDS all of this time and to be an advocate for people with HIV and AIDS as well. I've written a couple books along the way about women's issues in the clergy, and then, of course, Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells. It's a book of celebration of rituals, essays, and meditations for LGBTQ Jews and their family members. And there's a lot for if you're just a spiritual person and not necessarily Jewish. So.
Yeah, and even as a non-Jew, I was telling you earlier, I'm so encouraged after every passage that I read in here. A couple that I love, I just want to point out, is the Passover liberation. After your LGBTQ Passover theology, but you talk about, and I'm going to mispronounce this, so I need you to correct me. But the Mignat Leshavak, the from degradation to praise.
Yes, Mignut Leshavach. These are Hebrew words from the Passover Seder meal, where we read and reenact through ritual foods the story of the liberation of the ancient Israelites from slavery in Egypt. And that story of liberation, resonates, of course, in our own queer world of our coming out and our being free to be who we are. And so we've taken in this book, Where Pride Dwells, some special readings that we've created for a Passover Seder for LGBTQ people to use at their Seder, or for a queer Seder in a public setting, that are really talking about linking this notion of freedom and liberty and liberation to be ourselves and to be who we're called to be as queer people, just as the ancient Israelites were able to do as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why I am so drawn to Judaism. I grew up in Alabama as a Southern Baptist. I didn't know a single gay person, that too. I didn't know a single Jewish person until middle school. My middle school band director, he actually ended up moving to Israel right before the millennium. And so I never met another Jewish person until college. But even knowing what I knew about the Jewish faith, I was drawn to the struggle. And I don't know if that's because I felt I was in my own struggle, and it was nice to know that there was another community, even though I was not a part of that community, that was dealing with being told, that you're not right, you're not, one of us. It just seemed like there was a commonality it almost felt more at home there than it did in my own community. You know what I mean?
It's a very astute observation, Matt. Listen, today, the Jewish people have been the other throughout centuries, for millennia, and have been persecuted. Anti-Semitism is not something that's new. It's ancient. First it was the Greeks that came and conquered the Jewish people, and then it was the Romans, and then it became the Christian Empire, and the church did terrible things to Jews in the ancient world. We were not allowed in certain professions, and even in our own country, Jews were not allowed to be landowners, not allowed to live in certain neighborhoods. Even in our own city, we're located here, West Hollywood, the county of Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, there are still neighborhoods. If you go back and you buy a home and you look at what they call the covenants and restrictions, where the things that excluded Black people from buying in certain neighborhoods, it said you couldn't sell a house to a Jewish person in certain neighborhoods, even in Los Angeles, even in the 20th century. So there were quotas in colleges and hospitals that didn't hire Jewish doctors. Jews have been the other because we didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus might be an important teacher and role model in Christianity, but Judaism's older than that. And we do not believe that he was or is the Messiah or Son of God. And so we've been persecuted, and Jews perceive themselves as other. And the interesting thing, and I'll just say this in closing about that, is that the word Yisrael, which is how Jews, the people of Israel, not the modern state of Israel, that's another story altogether, but the Jewish people's name means struggling, to wrestle with God. There's a story in the Bible of the ancient patriarch Jacob wrestling in night with an angel of God, and it's the night before he's supposed to reconcile with his brother. And Jacob and Esau were twins, and so this struggling and this wrestling with God, if you will, has become the metaphor for what it means to be Jewish. We question God, we question authority, we question each other, and we struggle with trying to understand the world and trying to understand what makes life meaningful and what God wants from us.
It's so interesting because I've told you how I love to celebrate the Jewish holidays with my best friend Daniel's family. And Passover is one of my favorite times of the year because I get to go and ask these questions, and they love me being there because
I think, they have asked enough questions throughout the years. They know their stuff. But when this big old Gentile comes in to the table, they're like, oh, let's get ready. Let's get out the books.
But that's part of the Jewish tradition, is based upon asking questions, and our tradition is that we ask questions. We ask serious questions about faith and about God, and we get angry at God and we question God. We don't take everything that's written just as face value and that you can't ask questions. And the whole Passover meal, to go back to that idea of liberation, is based upon 4 questions. The youngest child begins the whole ceremony at the table by asking 4 questions. Why is this night different from all other nights? Mm-hmm. So the whole framework of the Passover Seder is about asking questions, hard questions, serious questions, as a way to learn, to explore, and to perhaps bring new meaning.
Not just perhaps, but let's just trust that meaning is going to be revealed to us.
Well, so it's so interesting, Matt. We have a saying in Jewish teachings that says, in every generation, each person is to imagine that he or she or they came out of Egypt. Mm-hmm. And what that really means is, not only is this story your story, where whatever generation you live in, whatever time period you live in, but it also means that you have to make it relevant in your time.
Yeah.
What's the story in your time frame? So making religion contemporary, making it current to the struggle that you're going through, is critically important in Judaism.
Yes. And specifically, since this is a queer themed podcast, that struggle is even more so when you have a religion that sometimes tells you can't be a part of this religion because of the way that you are. And you've really forged the way in helping the Reformed Jewish community learn how to love and accept us. And so you came out, if I'm not mistaken, in 1990 at the end of, or in the middle of the age of
episode. Right. And so, yes, when I was ordained in seminary at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which is the oldest Jewish learning seminary in North America from the mid 1800s, you could not be openly gay and be ordained. So we were all closeted, and we had a private support group that I started underground, where the gay students would meet to be supportive. We were worried about being outed. We were worried about being denied ordination. And in 1990, my denomination of Reformed Judaism was really debating this issue of ordination for queer people. And I came out in the LA Times because we need a face. Mm-hmm. This isn't just a theoretical discussion. And so it got picked up by all the wire services because it was pretty big news. I'm not the first openly gay or lesbian person to be a rabbi, but one of the first few. And so it actually gave a face and a name to the struggle. Yeah. And we were successful in 1990 in my denomination. We'd already welcomed gay people as members and gay synagogues into our denomination as early as 1972. But to be the spiritual leaders was a different story. And so we were successful in that, just as we were successful in 96 to get our denomination to endorse civil marriage. And in 2000, I wrote the resolution and carried the water, if you will, to also bless officiation of rabbis at queer weddings and commitment ceremonies. We were just in the middle of the beginning of the real efforts on marriage equality in 2000. And so that was in Reformed Judaism. I was a consultant in conservative Judaism in 2006 to their process. And today, in most of North American Jewry, Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, LGBTQ people are leaders, both lay leaders and religious leaders, and are fully welcomed into the tradition. The Orthodox world, a little different. That's our Jewish fundamentalists, like Christian fundamentalists, but there are pockets of welcoming even within the Orthodox Jewish world, starting slowly.
I did not know any.
Yeah, so there are small pockets where you could be a member of a synagogue without being shunned or without being forced out. So it's a beginning process in those corners.
I imagine some of those pockets. So is that from having a queer son or daughter that you're witnessing go through the trials? And
Yes, and it is. It's from witnessing family members who are transitioning from gender, who are coming out as gay, that and seeing what also in the rest of Judaism, the way in which we've held up the tradition on the one hand, the emphasis on inclusion and opening the tent on the other. The Jewish people is really small. The new Pew study in 2020, we're less than 2% of the American, 2.4% of the American population. And worldwide, the Holocaust murdered 6 million Jews. We are barely 14 million total worldwide now.
Wow.
We've never replaced the number of Jews who were murdered by the Nazis during World War II. So we are small. I like to say small but mighty people, and so we have to figure out ways to support one another. And I've been so honored and proud to push the envelope to talk about how LGBTQ people are a part of the Jewish story and part of the Jewish family and always been so, as well as to say that young queer Jews have a place and are making the table in the Jewish community.
I was going to say, I love that idea of not just having a place, but making the table.
They are. The queer Jewish community is particularly our young people are doing incredible things, really pushing again on gender nonconforming issues and non-binary, trans issues. Exactly. We're filming this together. I guess filming is not the right way. We're recording this just before Pride Month begins, and our Pride Month kicks off with one of our young queer trans activists tonight in our Sabbath services, who's speaking about her journey and her transition and the importance of trans activism in the Jewish community. And we'll be celebrating Pride all month at Congregation Kol Ami with Pride services and online Pride brunch with stories of people through different generations of their coming out stories, from their 80s to their teenage years, teenagers talking about how coming out is the same or different as it was from 1950s to now.
Yeah.
And affirming those stories.
I love that there's such a space for that in the Reformed Jewish Church, that there's such a space for those questions, for the struggles, for the acceptance, for not just for our community, but for the people who maybe don't accept us at first. Even they in the Reformed Judaism allow that space to say, okay, but what if I open my heart? What if I open my mind?
And what if I do the real study of what the Bible really says?
Yes.
Let's be honest. The Bible has been used to abuse LGBT people for centuries.
What you're talking about.
and most of it is a complete misreading and misunderstanding, particularly by Christian evangelicals. Let's be honest, who's doing the most harm and damage here. They don't read the Hebrew. They don't understand. The Bible was not given in English. Let's be clear. If we're believers, and we believe that the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, has any kind of authority or any kind of inspiration. I'll like to use that word rather than authority. You have to understand the historical context, the grammatical context of the Hebrew, and some of the passages that we see hurled at queer people and have used to abuse us actually isn't what it says in the Hebrew.
Right.
And so I want to just take a look at do we have 2 minutes to just talk about one of those stories?
Yeah.
So the story that's often used is the story of Noah. If people familiar with the story of Noah and the flood, the world was a wicked place, and God decided the creation that God had made needed to start over. But there was one righteous person in the world, Noah and his family. And God told Noah to build this boat, an ark, and bring the animals 2 by 2. And then it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The bad people were wiped out, and the world was going to be recreated by Noah and the animals and Noah's family. Well, Noah, and of course, this is an important queer story. Why? Because what was the symbol at the end of the Noah story? The rainbow was a covenant that God made with humanity, all of humanity, never to destroy the earth by flood again. Now, at the end of this story is a really funny thing. What happened after they came out of the boat, right? says Noah planted a vineyard, and Noah's sons and families started to live. And of course, one night Noah got drunk on the grapes in the vineyard, and one of his sons came into him. And the implication in the story is that there was something sexual misconduct happened between Noah and his son. And to the two others, there were three sons, and two other sons come in, and they says, cover up the nakedness of their father, which meant not to brush it under the rug, but to take care of their father, to sober him up, and to hold him accountable. So many times Christian evangelicals use this and say, see, this is proof that homosexuality is bad. This is not a story about homosexuality. This is a story about the problems of incest, sexual abuse between parents and children. And so in the queer community, we hold such trauma by our churches who have used the Bible to harm us. And we have to learn, and I understand people who say, I'm never setting foot in church, I'm never setting foot in a synagogue again. This is just not right. But it's been misused. And my heart breaks, because religion at its best should be a spiritual structure for dealing with ethics and living a life of meaning. And if your religion is not helping you do that, you should walk away.
Yeah, no, you're so right. So what kept you from walking away then, Rabbi? Because, I mean, obviously the fruits of your labor, you saw the fruits of your labor and your faith paid off. But I mean, in the 80s, when you're working with these communities who are dying and you know, at the hands of a lot of evangelical Christians who just refuse to accept the reality, what kept you up having faith in God to know that your voice would be used to impact millions?
Well, see, in Judaism, God is not this terrible God that punishes us. In Judaism, the word for prayer in Judaism is about self-judgment, not God judging you. So when you pray, you are examining your own actions, behaviors, words for how you can be better. And so my God is a God of love and presence, that God walks with me in the darkest moments, walk through the valley of the shadow of death with me, as well as in the moments of great triumph and joy. And so for me, my notion of what an idea of God, I don't believe in a being, Matt. I don't think there's some God sitting in a throne, some old dude with a beard. My God is more of a force of love that flows through all humanity and flows through all life, plants and animals, and that is a force for goodness in the world and kindness in the world.
Yeah.
So when I was sitting by the bedside of my friends who were dying of AIDS, my presence I was being an angel, if you will, of God, of being present, so that loneliness and suffering didn't happen in isolation. And that, I think, is, human beings are so social. That's what made the pandemic so hard, is we've had to be physically distant and physically isolated from one another. We long to be with one another and to celebrate that joy in being with one another. And so that Judaism says wherever two people study, there God dwells. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's the study of an ancient text like the Torah or the Bible, or it's conversing and learning about your neighbor,
yep,
that holy presence is there. And I think that's what we're striving to do in the world, is to be present with one another, to listen to one another, to respect one another, to love one another. And
but did you ever struggle? I mean, in those early days of before you came out, to even think, is there a God? Is the Jewish God real?
Oh, absolutely. I struggle all the time. I still struggle. It's not just isolated to back then. There are some days I look at the world and I say, what is going on? How can there be a God when the children are suffering, when the homeless are so filled on our streets? And then I remember that God made God somewhere else, and I'm here. And so what's my mission to help alleviate that suffering? And I think I bring a little bit of God into the world when I do help to alleviate that suffering.
You do. You really do. And that's one thing.
But not just me. You do too, correct, Matt. Well, you do too. We all have the power to do this. This isn't something that's holier than thou. This isn't something that's only for people who are ministers or rabbis or deacons or elders or monks in their tradition or imams. Or, this is something that is part of the humanity. When we help alleviate the suffering of another human being,
Yep.
we bring a sense of holiness and dignity into their lives and our own.
You're so correct.
And our own.
It's and in my own struggle with agnosticism, slash atheism, I really, where I am seeing the divine, and because I hate calling it God, because
I do too. I agree too. I have struggled with that too.
Yeah, and especially like in my trailer for this show, I talk about how people, when they gender God as a he, it just makes my skin crawl. Yes. But that divine, I only see it in people. But the other side of that coin is that I also see the devil in only people. Mm-hmm. Whatever the devil is, I see the opposite of God, the lack of that holiness. And so well, if we're all the same, how can we represent? I mean, I don't see a binariness between good and evil, because I think there's both in all of us, but like, it's just so confusing.
Listen, we're imperfect.
Yeah.
Human beings are not perfect. And my tradition recognizes that human beings have imperfections. And we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to be better each day, a little better each day. And some days you're going to miss the mark, and some days you're going to make the mark. But I know that many people, especially queer people, think of themselves as some way that because they were shamed about being queer, they were kicked out from their families. That somehow they will never measure up. And I just want to say to all your listeners, you are perfect in the way that you are, even with your imperfections. Yeah. Your perfection is your imperfections. And each day, strive to do one little step towards healing yourself and healing the world. And that is the way we bring the love of the divine into it.
You're so right. And I think it starts with healing ourselves, because I don't think that we can have that impact on others until it's like the airplane method of putting your own mask first so that you can then help other people. We have to do that for ourselves first.
And this is an urgent issue within our queer community. The healing our traumas, no one's going to do it for us. Healing our anger. Anger isn't always the actual emotion. There's plenty of time for righteous anger, with all the homeless on the streets, for the way our trans family members are being treated, and the attacks that are coming at them politically in so many states around our country to take away rights for our trans folks. This is where your righteous anger should be put to use.
Yeah.
But anger is often the first symptom of deeper losses, trauma, and grief. And we do have a lot to be sad about, a lot to mourn, a lot of losses to mourn. And unfortunately, in American society, we don't deal with grief very well, and we don't mourn our losses. And so one of the things that's why I am so dedicated, particularly around World AIDS Day or Transgender Day of Remembrance in particular, we always have special services in my community for this, particularly those days, is because we do have to acknowledge our losses as a community and to mourn them and grieve them. That's a step towards healing ourselves and our larger community. And that's how we can grow. And that's how we can put together the pieces, if you will, for one another.
Yeah, you're so right. One of the things I love about you is that you have a commentary on Christianity without having a judgment. You have such a grace for this, for my upbringing, my tradition, that I don't even have for my own upbringing and tradition. But like that, the concept of heaven and hell is used so intentionally to keep people in line or to make people behave better. What is the Reformed Jewish faith's take on heaven versus hell? Or even the existence of both or either?
Well, Judaism doesn't matter, just Reform Judaism. Judaism does not have heaven and hell. We don't have places that you're sent or a purgatory that you're going to where some judgment's going to be rendered. At the end of your life, you'll have to answer for your actions, good or bad. Do you make amends to people when you need to. We have a Day of Atonement every year called Yom Kippur. It comes in the fall, usually around September. It's part of our Jewish New Year's observances, a day of fasting and a day of introspection and prayer. And part of that process is you're supposed to make amends to people. Those of us who are familiar with the 12-step programs knows that making amends is a critical part of the healing of being sober and being in recovery as well. And there's a reason for that. That's part of the word, mention the word grace. Making amends is part of the grace we grant ourselves, to also not just be forgiven, but to forgive ourselves for the things that we have done in our life that don't measure up ethically, that don't measure up morally. But we're not damned to hell for those. In Jewish tradition, there are only 3 unforgivable acts: murder in the first degree, premeditated murder, because that person can never grant forgiveness. Incest, sexual abuse, which is again back to the Noah story that we talked about earlier, because it's so traumatizing to sexually abuse children. It's violence of the first degree. And in our tradition, it's idol worship, of worshiping false gods, which, in the ancient world was, statues of stone and wood, and in our day might be just as much money or fame or chasing celebrity.
Yeah.
So these are serious and powerful questions.
Right. But what is the result of committing one of those unforgivable acts in the Jewish faith?
Yeah. Well, depending on the time period in which you are, there is a process to work for, but there is, you have to, you go to jail. There's a legal system within Jewish tradition, and you have to serve your time.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. I don't think I knew that there's not a heaven versus hell scenario.
We don't have a heaven and hell. And so that has to be, where you're punished for all time, and there's no way to step back into life, into living. We sometimes will say you make your hell on earth by the choices that you make.
Yeah.
But that's more euphemistic than saying that there isn't one in our theology.
Right.
So I think for most, I think Americans in general, North Americans, those in Western civilization where Christianity is the dominant religion, we kind of think these things are general to all faiths, and it's just not true, in particular in Judaism. And so much of Christianity, there are good Christians. There are people who live their faith. There's segments of the Christian world that are welcoming and loving of LGBTQ people. There are LGBTQ leaders in a variety of Christian faiths. I think of my friend Reverend Susan Russell, who's Reverend Canon Russell here in the Episcopal Church in the Los Angeles area, Bishop Karen Olivito, who is a bishop in the Methodist Church, an openly gay bishop, lesbian bishop. I think of Reverend Troy Perry, who founded the United Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches. There are many LGBTQ leaders within Christian denominations who have led the way and who have transformed their faith communities as well. And also in non-Christian faiths, in Buddhism, in Islam, there are Muslims for Progressive Values. My good friend Ani Zonderveld,
yes,
who has really transformed so many people and is helping Islam go through a reformation to understanding the role of women and the role of LGBTQ people. I think what's happened is that the patriarchy, which does harm to women and trying to control our bodies. We see that now with a vociferous attack on the right for abortion rights in this country, reproductive justice in this country, as the Supreme Court's going to take yet another case that might do away with Roe v. Wade. The control of women's bodies. This is not good for gay people either, queer people either. It's not good for gay men. I want to say this. The patriarchy is not good for gay men because it's that same patriarchy that wants to control who you love and how you love. And so I challenge this particularly to my gay brothers, who can sometimes get a pass for being men in society that favors men. Think about your female and non-binary and gender non-conforming and trans brothers and sisters, because we don't get a pass. and the patriarchy is not good for our queer community. And so one of the things that I've done is smash the patriarchy where it's necessary, both as a woman leader, a woman religious leader, and as a lesbian who uses she, her, hers pronouns.
Can you, because you educated me a little bit ago before we started recording about even referencing yourself, and I found that so informative. Can you talk
Sure.
about?
Here's a perfect example how this exact issue of patriarchy plays itself out. I have been a rabbi for 33 years, and I have been I've been the president of all the Reform Rabbis Worldwide. That's the oldest and largest rabbinical organization in North America, but there's rabbis in Germany and South Africa and Australia, New Zealand, all. So really, like at the heights of my denomination, right? We don't have bishops, but that would have been what it was for a couple of years. So I was on a panel recently, an international panel with a rabbi from Germany, a rabbi from South America, a rabbi from Israel, and myself. All progressives, all welcoming of queer people. You know, one was also queer himself. You know, it wasn't about queerness. One was referred to as rabbi last name. The second one, rabbi last name. The third one, rabbi last name. And I was referred to Rabbi Denise. Now, there really doesn't seem to be malicious intent in that. And it's unconscious, right? Women are supposed to be more approachable, stereotype. But what the message is that they take the men seriously, and the women, well, they don't take women seriously when you do that. Now, there are many clergy, both women, men, and non-binary, who invite you to use Reverend first name. But as a matter of respect for the learning that one has had to do, think about it before you talk to someone about if it's in a situation where titles are used or titles are important. Do you use and the same respect that you use for a man as you do for a woman or a trans or non-binary, gender non-conforming person, and make sure that you check yourself. This is one of the ways that we also smash the patriarchy as well.
Yes, thank you. I didn't know if you would be able to talk about that as a personal like.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And I always say, you want to call me Rabbi Denise, you have to be 5 or younger, because at kindergarten, nursery school, okay. But if you're an adult, I mean, when you go into your doctor's office, unless you're on a first name basis with your doctor, do you use your female doctors, Dr. Sharon, or do you use Dr. Smith when you go? Right.
Can you speak to your interfaith efforts? You spoke about your friend Ani. You've spoken about your other Christian leaders who are progressive in their values and beliefs. But I know specifically your work with Reverend Denise Barnes at Hollywood United Methodist. And I know on each other's holy days, you kind of swap duties sometimes, don't you?
Well, we've shared pulpits, we exchange pulpits, we learn together, we've been in classes together and dialogue together. We've created social justice opportunities together, and our communities have done, feed the homeless programs together, and the clothing collections together. Listen, interfaith work is really critical. If we've learned anything, especially over the last 4 years, this country is so divided. Yeah. And one of the ways that we can work on that, even that political division, is to get to know people who are different than ourselves. And that's one of the reasons interfaith work is so profound, not because it's framed around politics, but it's when we have different faiths and different beliefs and different assumptions about the world, different cultures about how we were raised. It's important to know your neighbor down the street who may be different than you. And so I've always done a lot of interfaith work, Jews, Christians, Catholics, Islam, Buddhists, and I founded many years ago, it still meets today, we called it back then the LGBT Interfaith Clergy Group. I think it's changed its name to Queer Interfaith Group now.
We've reclaimed that word.
Yes, we have. Right, and I kind of laugh about it, and I know that's the word we use now. But the people who are in their late 70s and 80s in my congregation have a very hard time with that, because that was hurled at them as a demeaning epithet. So it is a generational issue. But I think it's pretty accepted now to use that word. I hope it is. If I'm not using it right, Please tell me.
No, I think so. And it's,
But we, you know, but in the early '90s, we founded a group here in LA. I was the first president and a founding president, and Reverend Dan Smith, who was retired now, but he was at West Hollywood Presbyterian and then West Hollywood United Church of Christ for many years, and I and Reverend Neil Thomas, who was served many years as the at Founders MCC, Founders Metropolitan Community Church. He's now in Dallas at the largest queer congregation in the world, Cathedral of Hope. So we founded an organization to do interfaith dialogue within our own queer community. And so we do it both within the queer community and the larger interfaith community. It does help, particularly in times of crisis.
queer leaders within the church are the ones that are saving the religions, the ones that are, I think, retaining the congregations, the ones that are teaching people to love harder, to think deeper.
And to be more open.
Yes.
To open the tent wider to individual people's different experiences. I think that's there's not one way to be a human being.
Yeah. And even like that idea of the open tent, I was raised Southern Baptist, and part of that evangelical Christianity is the belief that only one way can be right. And so we have to demean others in order to show that we are needed to them, so that we then, reinforce our own insecurity about our beliefs. But, and that's one of the reasons I also love Reform Judaism, because it allows me to have this connection to the divine without looking at others saying, you're less than me.
Right. And it is not based on bullying.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, if you're not conforming, right, there's a level of that, especially when you use it in a terrifying way to say, God doesn't love you. You're not human. Right?
Yeah.
That's just bullying.
Yep.
So let alone violence, and the violence happened and the abuse happened. So, it's really about acknowledging your human experience, your quest and thirst for the divine, for the holy, for the sacred, to ask questions of meaning, of what does my life mean, and how will I actualize that, asking deep, thoughtful questions, and then being in community. Because one of the things that I think is the hardest part of, and we've really learned this in the pandemic, is being alone.
Yeah. Being
lonely, and it is epidemic in our world. And when you're in sacred community with others, it can lift so much hurt and pain and grief and sorrow, and also bring joy and laughter. Mm. And life is hard enough, working every day, trying to make a living, paying your rent, mortgage, navigating traffic. There's a lot of those things, and there's not enough joy. And so I feel grateful to have a sacred community in which to celebrate. Not always all my best friends. My best friends aren't always a part of my sacred community. On the other hand, my interfaith work helps me to understand the depths of somebody's different experience.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful.
One of the things that I'm seeing, especially after I did my film Cognitive, is that religious trauma, no matter what age you are, seems to be the hardest trauma to reconcile, because it comes from such a subtle abuse that you witnessed as a kid. And it's hard to even recognize that until you're an adult. And then you have less of an ability to really go back to those days and figure out, what was hurting, who told me what. And so what efforts is Cole me, and you can talk about the church as well, because I know this church really does a lot for the queer community. What do you say to someone like me, a queer 30-something adult who struggles constantly with, do I go back to this idea of religion, or do I stay where I am because it's safer on this side?
Right. Well, I think part of it is a journey of discovery. What do you want? And I will tell you, we've had our numbers of people in our studying Judaism for the purposes of conversion and becoming Jewish has been huge. This year I have one of the largest groups of people ever, because the people who have been so burned by their Christian evangelical often abuse, but yet they still are thirsty and hungry and on a spiritual quest. Yeah. And so they're learning. They may convert, they may not. But I think when you ask deep questions about how do I make my life filled with meaning, that's a door and an opportunity to explore, and whether it's Judaism or other religions, if it's not your own, and then to find out where there are queer people if you were in a particular faith tradition that that was abusive to you. I certainly understand not going back to the abuser. But if there were things that you missed about it, not every church is that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be another tradition, another denomination that's meaningful. I know many of my Catholic friends who grew up in a Catholic environment where they too felt that they couldn't be gay or lesbian, or were kicked out of their parish, have found a home in the Episcopal Church because it's very similar in structure and in ritual.
When I went to the Episcopal Church, we called it the Diet Catholic.
Yes, exactly. So I know that they have found a spiritual home and nourishment in the Episcopal Church here in North America as a way to fulfill those needs for their search for and quest for meaning and purpose and spiritual quest.
I find it so interesting because it's, the queer community, I find that there's such a desire for a spiritual connection, but yet most of them are suffering so much from that spiritual trauma. And it's almost like there's an addiction to the abuse, and that's why they still try to go back to the abuser. They want to go back to the church where they love the choir singing, but yet that church may not welcome them. So I love that going back to your idea of not just a space at the table, but making your own table.
Making your own table. And it's so, and to seek out religious leaders who will take the time to listen to you and take the time to hear your story and your struggle and your pain and be willing to work with you. I know, like in our congregation, we offer, this summer, we will offer a Taste of Judaism, a 3-week class for people who it's free. It starts July 25th. It runs 3 Sundays. If we can find more about it at kol-ami.org. That's KOL-AMI.org. And look for the Introduction to Judaism and Learning sections. But it's a 3 free-week course for people, like, if you are on a journey to heal and if you think maybe Judaism might be something you'd like to explore without any commitments, come and study with us. It's all online. And so wherever your listeners are, whether in the LA area or beyond, we welcome you to come and learn more.
But you're online as well. So can you tell us more about what Kol-Ami offers? Because you have, we didn't get into like addiction and recovery, but I think that is a major symptom of queer religion trauma. And so you guys offer so much.
Our congregation, we're both we're edging into being in person again. Starting for Pride Month, we'll be back in limited numbers in our parking lot, and then hopefully soon being able to be indoors again. But we're also always online. Our worship is online at 6:30 Pacific time on Friday nights on Facebook, on YouTube, or our website kol-ami.org. But we run a ton of classes, everything from a Broadway showstoppers class. If you love musical theater and want to learn more about musical theater, we do that. We do run serious classes about learning about from the Bible each week and or Talmud, Jewish ethics. But we also we just ran a 3-week class on being non-binary, gender non-conforming, and what is that, and how does that work, and what does that mean, and what does it mean Jewishly, and what does Judaism have to say about that? And did you know that in ancient Jewish writings it talks about not just 2 genders but 6 genders? Yep. So all of that's on the Kol-Ami YouTube channel. If you want to go learn more about the ways in which Judaism is really different than Christianity, you can check out our YouTube page, Congregation Kol-Ami in West Hollywood.
What about some singles groups? You got any singles groups?
We do. We have groups. We have groups where people can meet others. And in particular, if you're in the 20s and 30s cohort, if you're in that age group, we have an amazing thing called the Open Yad Project. Yad means hand in Hebrew, but it's a 20s and 30s group. They meet for social. They meet online for social. They have their own governance, meaning they have their own leadership council that plans the programs. And we're just starting to meet back in person, and so they're meeting back in person for a Pride Month, a Saturday night event. So that's the Open Yad Project. We're on Instagram. We're on. We have our website. So please try and connect with us. And it's a lot of social, great meeting people of all types, gay, straight, trans, gender nonconforming, all together, hanging out.
That's fantastic. And just before we kind of wrap up, what are, you've told us about Kol-Ami, where can we find you on social media? And also want you to plug your books.
Yeah, no, you can follow me on Twitter at Denise Eger, or my profile page, Rabbi Denise L. Eger on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. But our temple website also has a lot of my writings, and or my website, rabbieger.com. You can see some of my reflections and writings there on a lot of queer stuff on that. I want to make sure before we go to read something from my book, because
I was actually going to ask if
as a way to kind of celebrate pride, celebrate our queerness, celebrate spirituality, and I want to share this as we think about entering Pride Month. It's a blessing for my LGBTQ ancestors. As queer people, we have our biological families, but we also have our families of choice, and that's our ancestors and elders of our queer community that did a lot for all of us to get here. This is written by a rabbinical student who is a conservative rabbinical student, a conservative Jewish rabbinical student. And there is a prayer in Jewish tradition that recalls the matriarchs, patriarchs of Jewish tradition. So it's kind of based on that. You who fought to love, you who prayed to the same God I do, you who insisted on your dignity even when the world said you had none, you who died of AIDS while fighting for a cure so that people like me might live, you who were shot in a massacre while on the dance floor, you who could not come out and held your secret until your dying day, you who were insulted, shamed, beaten, and brutalized, yet kept walking, you who contributed your fierceness, your originality, your art, and your voice to this world, I walk in your memory. I walk this path, smoothed and charted by your sacrifice towards justice, towards holiness, and towards freedom. And so as we celebrate Pride this year, I hope that all of your listeners, Matt, and that you will take strength in knowing that we are better together as one stronger queer community, that we take the time to get to know one another and listen to one another, and that we support one another by healing our traumas and listening to each other's deep longings of our soul and spirits, and bringing more of that kindness to each other and the world.
Yes. And just so you guys know, that's Where Pride Dwells, and I'll have that posted as well.
Yeah, it's Where Pride Dwells. It's available at pride.ccarpress.org. Or on Amazon. It's available at pride.ccarpress.org or on amazon.com.
I love your female Jewish queer voice. Everything you say, you can see me, the audience can't, but I'm just like enamored by you, because you just provide a message that I think I desperately wanted growing up in the Christian tradition and never got. So thank you so much for providing that for me, and I know for my listeners. Is there any, I did not see a prayer for the queer podcast in here, or a blessing for the queer podcast, but maybe next edition. But is there anything?
Well, here's what we say in Hebrew when we end reading one of the books of the Torah. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and be strengthened. So we're strengthened by your dedication, Matt, to bringing healing through this podcast to so many people, and enlightenment to so many people. Friends, if you're queer, if you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're bi, if you're pansexual, if you're asexual, if you're transgender, if you're non-binary and not gender non-conforming, let me just tell you, you are loved. You're loved by the force that created the world and the universe, and you are perfect as you are, and God wants to bless you and let us together heal us of our traumas to create the world we want.
Amen and hallelujah. I love that. That's such a great way to end this. And as you guys can tell, if religion is to be saved, it is going to be done through the queer voices in religion.
Amen.
I love you all. Thank you for listening. And please reach out to Kolami's website to see what all they have to offer our community. We'll see you next time.
The Fagnostic Podcast is a Matt Hayes production, hosted by, you guessed it, Matt Hayes. You can find me at matthayes.com. That's MATHAYES.com, or on all the socials at Hayes on it. HAYES on it. Music by Michael Spicer. The Fagnostic Podcast is proud to be supported by the Del Shore Studio. Whether you're acting from a pulpit or a proscenium, whether you're writing for a Bible study or a scene study, the Del Shore Studio is an online school offering classes and workshops encouraging all artists to scratch deeper. Visit thedelshorestudio.com for more information.